Welcome to Brightly You Radiant Being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. Each episode, we use our good and bad experiences, friendship, and passions to inspire thought-provoking conversation and soul-driven advice. This season, we'll travel from the fool's journey to the heroine's adventure to better help you create a life worth living and step more brightly into yourself, inch by inch.
Hi,
Amy. It's been so long.
And that was new.
Yes. I like it when we switch that. I feel like we've done it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so season 2 or 2022, our very last episode, we kind of let them in on the secret that we had an arc of conversation. So even if it didn't seem like things were planned, we did kind of have a roadmap where things were linked up in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But this year we dropped a trailer, like we're making it known.
We did drop a trailer, our first kind of trailer teaser ever. And that felt good because it sort of is, it makes it cemented in a way for both of us, I think, while still allowing other things to pop up. It's not like, so for the most part, that's what we'll be talking about. But obviously, sometimes things come up and then we want to talk about those, right?
Well, and that's the thing about journeys and adventure, right? You can plan, but things are still going to happen that you need to react to, improvise,
take a different route,
scream about, cry,
yes,
celebrate.
Exactly.
But so if it might be really familiar to some people, the phrase or term "fool's journey to hero's adventure," but that's not us, right? We kind of co-opted that from somebody else, somebody kind of famous, actually.
So if you're talking about Joseph Campbell,
yes. Why did I steal it from someone else too?
No, we probably will be referencing Joseph Campbell a lot because you have to admit, the myth knowledge is strong in that one. Now obviously he has passed on, and that was something that actually Tracy and I were talking about just a little bit before we started, that as much as I love listening to Joseph Campbell. I love the Power of Myth series. It's fascinating, and I've got another book of Joseph Campbell's, and I realized during it, I was like, oh, this is really masculine centered. But I also realized that it was, I think The Power of Myth, was that recorded in the late 70s?
At the George Lucas Ranch.
The late 70s. And so I just want to remind people that women were not allowed to get their own credit card without their husband's signature until like 1980, something like that.
In the 80s, yeah.
Right. So that is an important reference point. So I'm thinking that was a natural thing for Joseph Campbell. It's not like he was being misogynistic or anything like that. But so I do just want to call attention to that. So as much as I love Joseph Campbell, I'm always thinking of, I'm just thinking of the female perspective. And so that's why I called it the heroine's adventure. We'll probably go back and forth. I'm sure there'll be many times when we'll talk about the hero's journey, the hero's adventure without saying heroine. Just wanted to get that out there.
I'm just realizing we didn't look up or talk about, is there a non-gendered term for hero? We have the masculine, the feminine. Oops.
Yeah, I think that would be like the, I had a word and then I lost it. I almost want to say protagonist.
Well, yeah, they say hero is gender neutral, but I'm wondering, as the word and the world shifts, if there's
Mhm.
maybe some more gender sensitive or inclusive
Right.
language. But so as you said, we're going to change it up. We're going to try
Yeah,
and make sure that we're being representative of everyone. So if you're not familiar, Joseph Campbell is an academic. He's a professor. He's a researcher.
he was.
Was well, and what he's most known for is his work on myth. I first heard about Joseph Campbell when the television show Supernatural came out. And the creator, Eric Kripke, talked a lot, as did his writing staff and his other producers, about how influenced they were by his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which I own, haven't read. I'm going to be reading as we go on this journey. But I kind of at that time went on a Joseph Campbell deep dive, like Wikipedia type thing into
Oh.
his life. And when we talk about like goals, like as in terms of vibes for your life, like overarching goals, like, oh, this person's life is goals, that man used to get paid as an academic to just like his daily schedule was just to wake up, somebody made him breakfast. He would read for 8 to 12 hours. Right. I spent a lot of that time in Europe and then when he wasn't researching, obviously he was also a professor, was it Wesley or Wesleyan college, something like that.
Yeah.
But when I studied counseling psychology and got into like Martha Beck and Follow Your North Star,
Mhm.
everybody quotes him. So even if you're not super familiar with Joseph Campbell, or even if you're
Mhm.
like, I don't know what you're talking about with myth, you've probably have heard a quote from his, or you've probably watched a show that was greatly influenced by
I
him, because
mean,
authors and writers came to
yes.
him.
And so like you, it wasn't Supernatural, it was actually Star Wars for
Oh,
me. And
yeah, George Lucas is a huge
George
fan of his.
Lucas credits Joseph Campbell for the success of Star Wars because, and I will say this, George Lucas like literally followed it step by step, which is wonderful. And the book then that I have is The Writer's Journey. So it is Joseph Campbell's take on the hero's journey, but created in a way that's more, it's easier to digest, I would say. um but still very much rooted in the hero with a thousand faces. So this is a little off topic, but I just have to say this. Another thing that Tracy and I were talking about today is meditating. We both meditated before the show, each one not knowing the other one was going to do that.
I had a
I mean, it's
feeling
not,
you were.
yeah. So during my meditation, I was sharing with Tracy that it was just like, remember this? Remember that? Remember that time when you were 16 and your stepdad screamed at you? Like, what? And then just like all this, it was just kind of jangly. And then you shared, not this time, but the time before, that it was almost like, well, you should describe it. I love the way you described, like, here's your ego,
So
Tracy.
yeah, so I do Kundalini meditation. So I'm usually chanting or listening to chants, doing things with my hands, and also trying to chant it with my inner voice, in my brain. And sometimes I still get that chatter, even though I'm doing like all this stuff. And so sometimes I'll try and quiet the chatter by like visualizing my chakras lighting up or clearing them or connecting to source, or like a big light, going from me to the cosmos, right? And sometimes when I get that chatter, like I kind of have to, like, I know in meditation they recommend like it's not that you're in silence, it's that you're not attending to the thoughts that come by. You're
Right.
letting them exist and let them go away. And I kind of feel like sometimes, I have like my id and my ego who's having these, thoughts and like laundry lists of things, and like, oh yeah, you wanted to go in the Target app, you need paper towels. And then there's like the higher conscious me that's like, just meditate. And then there's like this intermediary between that's like, no, like we know you get distracted and it's important, like in this time of calm and quiet, like let's make some notes, let's pause and write some things down.
I love that so much. But the thing, so what I wanted to say is that one of Joseph Campbell's quotes is like his idea of the hero's journey is to slay the savage dragon of the ego and to follow your bliss to the truth of your life. I mean, that's pretty dramatic. But so I kept thinking, I just need to slay that savage dragon in my head, reminding me of when I was 16. Okay.
Whereas I more have like the dragon tamer, the dragon whisperer.
I
That's
know.
like, come here, little dragon.
I love that. And honestly, maybe that would be a good thing to do. This is a little off topic. I don't care. Is to have that other voice be like, okay, so maybe there's some unresolved trauma from that, Amy. Maybe you need to look at that. And then I could be like, okay.
This meditation can cut that cord. This meditation can be used to forgive yourself or him or healing, or we can make a note to attend to this later. Like,
I love that. I do.
What I love about what you said though is Joseph Campbell's most famous quote to me is "Follow your bliss."
That is his most famous quote.
And I think when I think back to the start of the show, I don't think we ever talked about him. I don't think we ever talked about following your bliss. But I think at its core, that's what Brightly is aiming to do, is to help people follow their bliss.
Apparently, it took us 2 full seasons to just be able to narrow that down.
Narrow it down and be like, so now, here's this singular influence, not only in your life, but in everybody's life who's ever written anything you've watched or read or heard about.
I feel like that's sort of like, in a way, what Martha Beck was saying as well with Follow Your North Star is indeed follow your bliss.
And she references Campbell's influence in her work.
Yes. Yeah.
But
so we kind of joked that our first season, we constantly were talking about Carl Jung. And then now we're going to be talking about Joseph Campbell, but also Joseph Campbell references Carl Jung. So it's a nice little bow.
Who would have thought that we would all be interested in the same thing? But so for season 3, going back to how we started, we have a trailer. And so a lot of season 3 is going to be around myth and me, myth and you, the proverbial me as it would be. Right. But so I wanted to kind of take a step back, as you talk about the hero's journey, heroine's journey, and then the book that you brought up, which is the writer's journey, right? And we referenced the Bill Moyer, Joseph Campbell PBS special, or I think it's PBS, right? The Power of Myth. What is myth? Because I think when I first hear the word myth, I'm like, are they going to be talking about that Circe book? Is this going to be about Medusa? Is this going to be about Greek mythology? So, like, that's the first thing that pops up. But myth is so much more than that. It's greater than that.
It is. But here's another Joseph Campbell quote that I love. I absolutely love it. And it's so simple. He says, myths are clues to our spiritual nature. And all myths deal with apparently it's very hard for me to say myths plural. All myth deal with transformation of consciousness. Wow. Now, that's like the big thing of what myth is.
So myth at its core, myth is a story, and
myth is a story.
It's either grounded in history or it's just historical, or kind of like I said, like we have those very well-known ones from the Greeks, right? Or from other areas, but it can also be an idea or a belief. Myth is also, think about Mythbusters. It also goes back to like false ideas, right? So when you think about myth and how we're going to go through season 3 and what we're going to talk about today, it's kind of the story of you this year, right? Like the fool's journey to the heroine's adventure. So in terms of like Brightly, we're still going to be talking about how to live your brightest self, how to be your brightest self, right? How to brighten up, all the different topics we've had, but it's going to be in the context of storytelling, I feel like.
Yeah. And I think probably the easiest way to, like, with any story, right? We start at the beginning. Well, not always, but at the beginning of a story, typically, like if you were thinking of your own story, you are more than likely in your everyday world, right? This is my everyday thing. I get up, I go to work, I do this, I go grocery shopping on this day, I do this other thing on this other day. And the same is true in stories, is that you start with the ordinary world so that then when the call to adventure comes, then it's sort of this complete, it's like a dramatic difference of what the ordinary world is. And I think of like adventure. I'm not just talking about somebody calling you up and saying, I have an extra ticket to Antarctica and do you want to go? A call to adventure can be small or huge. And I think that we probably have multiple calls to adventure many times in our lives, if not in our months or weeks or even in a day, right? But it's what we do after we get that call to adventure. And so often I can be very guilty of this. Well, I guess you can only be guilty or not guilty, not very guilty. And I feel like I do it with you, Tracy, and with other people. I get this lovely invitation to do something, maybe something I've never done before. And my initial reaction is refusal of the call. I'm like, oh, nope. I don't want to spend the money. I'm not going to do this. It's too cold. It's COVID. It's that. Whereas I feel like you don't refuse the call. I feel like your
modus operandi.
Modus operandi is always picking up the call.
So it's so funny you say that. So I used to have this job where I worked with little kids with emotional behavioral disorders. This is connected. Please stay with me. I'm a storyteller. And
this is the ordinary world, people.
I would come home and talk to my roommates or my friends, or I had another job about my day and my family. And they would all encourage me to quit because it seemed very dysfunctional. It seemed very violent. It seemed very hard. And when I left that job, for all those reasons and more, I realized I no longer have a story every day. That was actually the best part of that day, was I came out of every single day, work day, with a story. And when you sit at a desk, especially working from home, I have so few stories, right? And it's hard when everything you do is in a screen, right? Like I have a dad who has I have a dad. My dad has a job, and all of his jobs have been very much in the moment, right? Like he was an investigator. And so he'd go and talk to people, and at the end, he either solved or didn't solve the crime. Right now, he works on a train, right? And so his job, it's you move this to here and you do this, and then you go home and you're done. Working in administration, and I'm sure a lot of people with digital jobs can attest, it seems like the work is never done, and like you don't have something to produce at the end of your process, right? Like even if he moves trains every day he can look and be like, the train was there and now it's there. Whereas I'm just like, I typed, right? Like I had thoughts. And so when I realized that, I decided I want to have more stories to tell. And I want, like all these little weekend trips.
You went to the theater by yourself.
I did. I love,
not
oh my
the
God.
movie theater.
I do that too.
Theater. Yes, you do. And
yeah,
I think that's very adventurous.
And I look at it all as an adventure, and I try to. And so that's why that quote you just gave, I'm so surprised I hadn't heard it. All myths deal with transformation of consciousness. And so it's really easy to have like this academic viewpoint of that, and is like, oh, this myth, this character in the myth, this person, this character we're meant to learn a lesson from had a transformation of consciousness. And then when you said that, I like took a step back and I was like, well, I, as the reader, through hearing this story and going through this journey with them, I've had a transformation of consciousness. And then even still yet, while you're talking, I had like this third layer where I was like, we are all on an internal journey ourselves. And we have all these internal transformations of consciousness that other people don't have. Because like you said, like you don't have to be going to like Mordor to throw a ring in a fire, right? Like you could go to the grocery store and have this transformation of consciousness, right? Like we just had one talking about our experiences meditating, right? And how we view like, those frustrating moments of like our brains going off topic. But like that idea of the transformation of consciousness has so many different layers to it. And it doesn't have to be big. It could just be going to the theater by yourself. It could be going for a hike. When you took that week off of work, I still think back to that transformed my consciousness, and you had like, you
Yeah.
discovered your perfect week. And now I think of in moments when I'm doing these things that I like to do and these tiny adventures, I was like, would this be a part of your perfect week? Is this just a perfect day because it's outside of the normal? Or like, would you want to do this daily? Right? Like, and so I feel like my consciousness was transformed by hearing your experience, because now I look for my
Yeah.
perfect
Okay.
week, my perfect moments.
And I feel that you create your calls to adventure. I never feel like, yes, I'm sure that there are times that other people will, reach out with a call to adventure, but I feel like you're just like, okay, if no one's reaching out with a call to adventure, I'm going to create my own calls to adventure. Whereas I I don't know if I'm like lazy or feeling old,
Or you're
but
not looking at what you do as adventure.
well, yeah, so it could be that. It could be that I just need to transform my consciousness to see what I'm doing as adventure. Um, but I do think too, so this whole thing, we want to reflect on our actual day-to-day experience. And I think that what this is making me realize is that well, first of all, I should be all about adventure because I'm a freaking Sagittarius and an Aries rising. Like,
You got a
I don't
Taurus moon that wants to stay
know.
home.
No, seriously. My Taurus moon is strong. My Taurus moon is like, we've got food and popcorn and TV and we're good. um, but one thing that I just want to talk about with your job where you
Mm.
were, even though you had the great stories, but you were kind of miserable,
I was terrible.
is
Yeah.
that so often, even
Adventures
when
suck.
even when we're uncomfortable, we are, it's like it's an uncomfortableness that we're used to.
I
And so
gotta
then we don't want to make these big changes because it's like, yeah, I might not be comfortable. I'm uncomfortable, but what if I do this thing and I'm even worse off?
I took 40 days off of TikTok as part of my 40-day
Yeah.
reset at the end of the year. And I recently went back on it, back on the sauce, as it were. And I came back into this new trend. And some people consider it controversial, but the lucky girl trend, where there are these two girls in a
Oh,
car just talking about lucky girl syndrome and how they just go into every situation presuming it's going to work out and believing they're the luckiest girls in the world, and it works. And while there is a lot of privilege within that and some other things that I think do need to be talked about,
yeah.
I think that's how I approach a lot of adventure and a lot of things, is just that I prepare, as you know, as much as I can for things. I try and anticipate good and bad, what's going to happen, and be ready for it. But at the same time, I have this underlying belief, if my car breaks down and I'm on the way to the North Shore and no cell service, it'll work out. I'll figure it out. I've figured it out before. I'll figure it out again. I get lost in this hill. We'll figure it out.
I do. I mean, we did a whole episode on luck.
Yeah.
And I feel like your mindset is spot on for that. Like,
Well,
I can see myself going into many situations saying, I know it'll work out for me, but I'm not at
so
the stage
we've
that you're at.
but we've both worked with the same person who is really challenging to talk to, because they will tell you about a situation, and her and I, let's say we had the exact same thing happen. It would be two different stories. Mine, I'd tell the story and it would be upbeat and by God, can't believe this happened. And I feel so lucky and it all worked out XYZ. And completely, forgetting all the hard work or money or, the negative cost of it, because I'm so relieved and happy it worked out the way it did. And in my head, worked out the way it was supposed to, and that it was always going to. That other person could have told the exact same story and all they saw was the negative aspects of it and all they talked about. And it just seems like a complaint and, oh, poor them, right? Like they had some really terrible things happen to them, weather related. And instead of being like, just appreciative and having gratitude about that it all worked out, right? I had the money to fix it, not what I wanted to spend the money on, but I had it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had the resources, and now I get a beautiful new space because, right? Like, so I think, like you said, the mindset is different. I go into it presuming good things are going to happen. That doesn't mean my mood in the middle of all that is that. Like, even in some of my luckiest moments, I do recall sitting there going, what'd you get yourself into now? And like we have to fix it. Like, this sucks. This is uncomfortable. But I think in order to have that transformative experience, and in order for it to be a story worth telling or worth reading, there has to be that adversity, right? That you overcame and you learned from. Nobody wants to
Yeah.
see the person who goes through adversity and doesn't learn anything again and again and again. Those are the TV shows you bail on. Those are the
Right.
books you don't finish.
But also, if there's no adversity, it's pretty damn boring
Right.
too, because then there's nothing to come back from. So it's interesting. Here is a couple things that Joseph Campbell says. The achievement of the hero is one that he is ready for. The adventure, let's see, a manifestation of his character, the landscape and conditions of the environment match the readiness of the hero. And also, the adventure that he's ready for is the one that he gets. So in a way, too, I feel like if you have this feeling in your life, like, what is that quote, the universe is conspiring with me, whatever. If you have that
In my
kind
favor,
of
yeah.
attitude, in my favor, the adventure you get will sort of it will bolster that idea as well.
God, so this just shows like myth. These stories transcend time and cultures because they're so relatable.
Yeah.
And so there's so much of myth that's grounded in psychology. I think that's why a lot of psychologists or people like Martha Beck are pulled towards Campbell, and why Campbell was pulled towards Jung, right? Is it's all about the psychology and how we do things. Because when you think about the what you're ready for, and it makes me think about, like, I've done therapy before where I've gone back to the same therapist and been like, I thought we fixed this. I thought I was fixed in this arena. I'm ready to move on now. Why did it happen again? I know better. To know better is to do better. And they just brought up, but like, they were like, but Tracy, like, your cycles are shorter now, right? So when you think about like a spiral or a tornado, kind of like that looping down or whatever, the first time I went through it, I was in that big outer spiral at the top of a tornado. And like this time around that pushed me there, I was like, it's like the 5th time in my life this has happened. Why aren't I doing better? I have a degree in this. Like, God damn it, universe. And Tracy, like, what is this? And they're like, but you came here immediately. That, before it set you back years, now it's set you back 3 weeks. And before you were depressed and sad and shameful and guilty, now you're annoyed and wondering what you can do better, and you're ready to do it, right? And so I kind of feel like that is where like the hero has 1,000 faces, and characters in TV shows and movies, and you're just like, God, they're still doing that. I think that's such a great representation of just like human nature, and that even if you're ready for it, you're only gonna be able to incrementally move so far, right?
Exactly. One time, Nathan and I don't remember I think we were watching Avatar the first time it came out. So Nathan was very young at the time. I don't know, 10, 12. And he says to me, Mom, have you ever noticed how many things the hero has to go through before like he's successful with something? And I was like, and that, my good sir, is the hero's journey. No, I didn't say that to him, but it was kind of interesting that even he was like, wow. And when you think about a myth we're familiar with, like Hercules, wasn't there like the 12 trials or the 12 tests of Hercules? So I think that there can be different trials and tests. And I think that in real life, typically what happens is that it's not a character arc like that, but it's like a
scribble.
It is a scribble. But I think when we're in the middle of that scribble, if we can go, oh, I see what's happening right now. I'm refusing the call. And maybe what I need to do is talk to somebody who's been through this, or, which is, of course, then like the mentor person that we're talking about. Uh, we haven't started talking about, but that is
one of the
very
roles
prevalent.
within this.
Yes.
When you think about a hero, and Hercules specifically, I immediately go to Disney's Hercules.
I know.
And he was sent to a trainer by, he finally found his dad, and went to his dad's temple, and Zeus came alive, and he's like, Dad, tell me what to do, and like, you're a god, fix me. And the dad was like, I can't, but go to this goat man and he'll take care of you. And I think that's so true of like our lives. So many of us, what's that saying? You are the five people you most closely hang out with,
Yes,
right?
yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's always challenged me, because I was like, well, the people I want to be don't want to hang around me because they're trying to be something greater than me, right? Like they're hanging out like
Tracy, I am really happy that you said that, because I think that is a challenging thing for more people than maybe admit it.
so. But that's what I love about like this hero's journey and viewing your life through that, is instead of me being like, how do I break into that social circle and fake it till I make it and be desirable enough for these people I want to be like to hang out with me? I think it's much less stressful to be like, oh, I need a mentor. I need a mentor. I need to join a professional group. I need to join a group aligned with my hobbies. I need to take a class, right? Like there's so many other things you can do to show, to both align yourself energetically with who you want to be and also get that help you were talking about. And sometimes too, like that's therapy. That's, so many people, are like, oh, psychiatry, psychologist. I'm not going to go and tell somebody my problems. And I've always viewed it as, oh, I have a problem greater than myself. The people already in my life are going to keep me where I am because they like me, right?
Yes.
Whether or not it's because we're mirroring each other, mostly it's just because they like you and want you to feel better. And they're like, oh yeah, you can vent to me. And of course I'm going to tell you all your adversaries in the story are wrong. They're the problem, right? And you're fine and you're great and you don't need to change. You just need to feel better. And instead, when you go to therapy, you get somebody that can help you, and a mentor would do the same, that can help you step outside of yourself and give you tools to help get you to where you want to be and get you through it.
Yes. And I think too often, often the mentor is someone who has literally been where you are now and has gone past that point, has figured out a way to get past that point. And so often when we decide we want to talk to somebody about our problem, it's someone who's probably just wallowing in the same problem or in a different problem, but has not gotten past that point ever. I feel like this is like such a big topic, just the mentor piece.
Sure.
But I think that also, the other thing that sometimes happens with the mentors, that we think of somebody like the, Obi-Wan Kenobi, stature. And it's not always that either. Like you said, a therapist. I mean, that
it could be many people, right?
It could be many people. It has been like a person in a grocery store line who has just like said something, and I was just
thinking that too. Like a cashier who just gives you perspective on an issue. Like yes. I gave myself avocado hand once before, thinking I'm on the Food Network and I'm going to chop the pit out of my avocado. And instead it went through it and into my hand. And after I'd gone to the doctor and I was at Target and I was buying first aid stuff because I had just moved into a new place and didn't have any. And she's like, oh, can I ask what happened? Because very clearly all I was buying was first aid kit supplies and my hand was all wrapped up. And I told her she's like, how many stitches? And I was like, oh, just 6. And she goes, that's a lot. And I was like, is it? Is it? I've never gotten stitches before. 6 seems like I was thinking I was pretty lucky. And she goes, it's a lot for an avocado. And oh my God, is that how I approach life now? This Target cashier whose name I don't remember. There's so many situations not related to medical care where I'm like, it's a lot for an avocado.
I love it so much. I really do. That's so interesting because my husband not to give too much away, but he was, and this is many years ago, just like living check to check and sometimes not even that.
Yeah.
And he was on the phone. This is back in the day when you would call the bank and talk to a banker to be like, oh my God, I'm overdrawn. Can you just give
Right.
me a whatever? And the banker said to him, you know, I noticed that you get cash from ATMs that aren't this bank, and you get charged this amount every time you do that. That statement literally shifted everything, and it actually kind of snowballed to other things in his life. Just the fact that this person pointed out this little tiny
Objective thing that was
Yes.
probably in front of your face that you were probably ignoring,
Yes.
that now it's like, oh my God,
Oh,
change the
that
trajectory of my life with this simple
yes.
statement.
Yes. So I
So,
think that that's part of it, that mentors can be and be open to the idea of anyone can be a mentor.
and also that means I've been a mentor to other people without realizing it,
Exactly.
right? Doesn't that make you feel better as if you're on a windy scribble of a journey right now, to be like, even in this moment, I have still mentored somebody informally somehow.
Well, Tracy, you mentored me before the show when you said I have that one voice in between. That's like,
I mean,
no. I
we have
think
a
you
podcast where we talk about the stuff. I hope we're helping people. Just screaming into the ether, right? Okay, we only have a couple minutes left. So
okay.
I just, as we kick off season 3, I just want to say, if you don't think you're already in a journey, look for where you could start one, right? What is a call that you want to answer?
Yeah.
What's a story you want to begin, right? When thinking of your life, we kind of talked about that with mosaic of your life, right? Like, what do you want to craft? If you don't have anything in front of you, what's a problem you need to solve? And then, as you're just talking about, find mentorship in some way.
Or where can you be a mentor?
Mentor and mentor your damn self. You know better. Journal. Go back and do all the exercises from season 2. We talked about a lot. You're already listening to a podcast. You've started that journey.
I love this. Yeah, this is great. And thank you all for listening, for being here with us during this conversation. You know, we'd love to share this conversation with more folks, and we're asking you to help us with that. So subscribing to the podcast, rating it, and of course, if you have a minute, a review really helps place the show in front of more people. You can always reach out to us via Instagram and YouTube under The Brightly Podcast, or via email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, we hope you have a bright and beautiful day.